It is really a pleasure for me to be here. It is 2024 looks like a homecoming for me. I am now part of the board of curators of E.A.T. I have a show at Kunstmuseum Basel and Kunstmuseum Bern. Switzerland has never loved me this much, so this is amazing. I think that it is, when we got together last year with Hans, Daniel, and Philip, and BJ, and Christina to think about what we would want to speak about this weekend. The idea of powerlessness came up very, very quickly. And I also think that we crave for realness and connection, and that craving is manifest throughout the globe. Violence, inequality, discrimination are rising sharply, both in ways that in places where they were already prevailed, and also in those where they were hitherto attenuated or less evident. I believe that the COVID-19 pandemic has accentuated these tendencies and generalized the dysfunction and alienation. And even as markets and institutions have forced us, or I rather say lured us, made us believe that we can resume our lives as before 2020, as if nothing has happened, and the way we like to think of, we like to lure ourselves and also lie to ourselves that these kind of things, this kind of phenomenon, these kind of incidences that really cut sharp into our daily lives have no value or have no impact is wrong. And I personally believe that the art system has contributed to the harm. So the pandemic was a defining milestone, and in a world of artistic and cultural production, and that's what Daniel reminded us earlier, it was a brutal wake-up call in our system as cultural workers and financially precarious art institutions struggled for survival, and massive layoffs were implemented with impunity, literally, across the board of Western art institutions. So the wealth of money and protagonists of our industry actually accrued. More art was acquired during the pandemic than in the years preceding it, as collectors retreated in homes where they have more time at hand to buy art. All this while rich museums with billions of dollars endowment and other trust funds and seed collections cut costs by hiring personnel deemed superfluous, namely from public programming and education departments respectively. So this is just to set the stone of the two people that are curated into this program. It is really for me a great pleasure, an important statement to bring to this conversation a somewhat different kind of voices than you are maybe used to hear when you come to eat. So I strongly believe that the conversations that we are having about powerlessness is a little bit, has to be sort of augmented with the idea of hopelessness somehow. And how do you form that in a context, and particularly in a pristine environment like here, in a country like Switzerland that is so powerful in many ways and in many areas, and how this idea of powerlessness even applies to an environment like this. So currently at Zeitz-Mocha, we have an exhibition that is very dear to me. Some of you who will be traveling to Cape Town during the course of the year might see it. Those who don't get that far, you can also see a version of it very soon in Paris at Palais de Tokyo. And the exhibition I talk about is called Past Disquiet. Past Disquiet is an exhibition, is an archival exhibition that speaks to 4 seed funding, seed collection for 4 countries to raise awareness of the political situation on those countries. One of it is South Africa, of course, Palestine, Chile, and Nicaragua. So, and I believe that there is value in thinking about togetherness. There is value in thinking about solidarity. And there is value in thinking about new spaces of togetherness and new spaces of connection, because at the end of the day, people are more important than things, and we live off each other and we thrive on connection. I would like to introduce Rasha Salti. I've never seen such a modest bio of someone who has done so much in the field of contemporary art, in the field of film studies, in the field of so many things. I like to say that Rasha is the person who makes other people more intelligent. She's like the accelerator of minds, and she's the brains of brains most of the time. And she has been instrumental in so many projects, including the Berlin Biennial, including many of projects that I did, including the Toronto Film Festival, including so many things. I don't understand why there's not much about it. So Rasha is here to speak to us about a space of regeneration that we call the garden. Thank you.
I want to begin with gratitude to Koyo, always to Koyo, for everything and for bringing me here. And today specifically, I would like, I've never been to this part of the planet. I've been to the French side of the Alps. It's really glorious to be here and to still see snow. I don't know how long we will have that privilege. My gratitude also goes to Christina and Dale and to the whole team, and for your wonderful attendance. Hopefully you will not be bored. I am very privileged to be part of this gathering. It is an honor to be in the same program as Simone Fattal, a brilliant artist, but also an incredible woman who's been very dear to my heart. Sometimes friends are like havens, they're like refuge. Simone has always been a guide, wise. Her house has been a haven. And yes, I urge you not to miss her talk. Once I Enter the Garden is actually the title and the first verse of a song, a sort of classic song from the late 1930s or early 1940s, what is often described as the golden age of Egyptian cinema. The song first appeared in a film, but outlived it. And it's considered to be a romantic classic. It is written and composed by the Bing Crosby of Egyptian cinema, Farid al-Atrash, but it was mostly known for the singer Asmahan, who is a diva in the Arab world and who had a very short life that ended tragically in a car accident. Her life was also shrouded in colonial intrigue, mystery. She was thought to be assassinated because she was a double agent, playing the British against the French colonial mandate administrations. I will read a few verses, just so that you have it as a reference. Once I entered the garden to smell the scent of the flowers and distract my sad soul and listen to the song of birds. I looked and found on the branches a nightingale and his mate, standing with her in silence. It made me happy to see him. He put his wing around her, and as he took care of her tenderly, And from his love for her, he sang her a comforting song. So, romantic song that actually ends badly. The nightingale flies away and leaves his love behind, and she keeps waiting, and he never comes back. But that's not where I want to go this morning. It's too early anyway in the day. What I do want to do is copy or take cue from what Patrick Chamoiseau, the Martinican writer, the way he describes the conteur, or the storyteller. First of all, storytelling only should happen at night. And he describes the storyteller as the person who basically creates the dramaturgy of an encounter, of a convening. And the storyteller is also like the conductor who gives cues to the emotional ups and downs of a gathering and of an evening. But he's also the prompt of revelations. Interestingly, the storyteller during the day transforms into a basket. And so I am a basket in front of you. But I wanted to share stories, basically. I don't have theories. I only have questions, and I have anecdotes. Before I do that, I will also try to answer Daniel Baumann this morning, and in a way react to what Koyo just said. The art world is indeed, the carbon footprint of the art world is horrific. And the art world is probably one of the industries that is least studies in terms of ecological toxicity. We should really pay attention to that. At the same time, I do believe that art can make political change. If we think of the AIDS crisis, of its cruelty, and the fact that it emerged at a time when homosexuality was considered a taboo, and when in most so-called democracies it was criminalized. Were it not for the painters, the poets, the writers, the filmmakers, the singers, people with the AIDS virus would not have reclaimed their humanity and their dignity. It was their work. It was not the scientists who discovered the medicines. It was not the policymakers who tried to promote educational programs. It was the artist, first and foremost. Everybody else came behind. And so, yes, I do believe that art can make drastic change. For the past 15 years, I have been researching a totally forgotten or ignored type of museums. Koyo referred to the exhibition that is now up at Zeitz-Moka. My research was conducted with a brilliant woman called Christine Khoury, and together we transformed the exhibition, research into an exhibition that we titled Past is Quiet. It is opening soon on February 16th at the Palais de Tokyo. If you might drop by Paris, it would be lovely to see you there. It will be there until the end of June. So the exhibition basically talks about a kind of museum that emerged between the 1960s and the 1980s. And they were known as Solidarity Museums. What is a Solidarity Museum? It is a museum that is organized by artists, curators, and art critics. It is entirely made up of donations, and these artists donated artworks to illustrate, to demonstrate their support for a struggle for justice or a struggle for liberation. It was invented by the Chileans in 1971 under the presidency of Salvador Allende, the first museum in solidarity. And the leader of the group that invented it was a legendary Brazilian critic, curator, and political thinker who was received by Allende as a political exile because of the military dictatorship in Brazil. His name is Mario Pedrosa. Mario Pedrosa was one of the founders. I mean, I don't know how many curators start political parties. He did. He was one of the founders of the Workers' Party. He holds his membership card is number 1 and Lula is number 3. That's how fantastic he was. Anyway, so the Solidarity Museum is kind of one of the incarnation of what the Salvador Allende presidency meant. The collections, after the coup d'etat, Chileans in exile in Europe and in Cuba and in Mexico started the effort again. And this time it was described as a museum in exile, but it was supposed to delegitimize the Pinochet dictatorship. It was very successful. Commissions of collection were set up in France, in Sweden, in Poland, in Finland, in Mexico, in Colombia, in Spain. Anyway, today there is a museum in Santiago, which I recommend because it probably has the most outstanding modern art collection. And it's called the Museum of Solidarity with Salvador Allende. Its doors are open, and given the political upheaval in Chile in the past few years, they are really still reinventing and redefining the role of a museum in a community, in a society that is experiencing extreme political polarization. So the past is quiet. So a lot of artists copied that initiative. There was a collection in support of the struggle against apartheid. There was a collection in support of the Sandinista revolution in Nicaragua, and one in support of the Palestinian struggle. Of course, thinking about these museums today, thinking about solidarity from the 1960s, 70s, and 80s today, is maybe it's useful, but I don't think the answer is to copy. And especially in light of the Anthropocene and the call for decolonization. So in rethinking museums, I invoke the image of a garden, and this is the first story I want to tell. And it's the story of Issa's garden. Once I entered a garden in Dakar, and it was my first visit to the city, prompted by the Biennial of Art in 2012. The Dakar Biennial is invariably memorable, not because of the actual exhibition, but rather because of what happens around it, namely the off-biennial. It was Koyo who urged me and who took me to visit that garden or courtyard. So the courtyard is an open space between several multi-story buildings in a neighborhood very close to Dakar city center. The courtyard was the open-air studio of the departed, much-loved and dearly missed Issa Samb. Like most important and historic spaces in Dakar, it revolves around a tree. A massive tree, with its roots half exposed, branches shooting to the sky and dangling like dreadlocks to the ground. The courtyard had a metal gate that was most often open. There was a shed or several sheds covered by tin roofs. There were tables. There were drawings, paintings, montaged ready-mades strewn everywhere. Quilted fabric collages dangled from the branches of the tree, and sometimes flags. The courtyard was clearly a space of creation, of bustling creativity, and it seemed totally chaotic. There were chairs, there were benches, tree trunks. Invariably, people gathered there. Between the chaos from the dust from the city and the ambient pollution, the first impression was not of comfort or reassurance. However, the sense of discomfort one overcame very quickly because the magnetic pull was much stronger. Issa's courtyard was a place of convening by design or by accident. People brought things and took things. Issa commandeered the space, but also delegated power. He assigned tasks, gave missives, In Issa's courtyard, the question of authorship was irrelevant, as was the question of ownership. The courtyard was undoubtedly his, but it was also ours. Those who frequented it regularly swept, dusted, rearranged, painted, fetched libations, and served guests. It does not rain much in Dakar, but Issa's drawings and artworks were exposed to rain, wind, dust, and sun rays. The marking of all these elements are not considered damage. They are part of the artwork. Collecting Issa's work is very complex. Transporting Issa's work to white cubes is extremely challenging. Talking about gardens seems far-fetched in the age of the Anthropocene. Museums, I don't mean to say that museums are gardens, and gardens should not be museified. Issa's garden, to me, holds an answer for where we might start from in the journey to transform museums, biennials and triennials. Because you all know how much each edition of its biennial, because you all know that with each edition of its biennial, Venice sinks deeper in the water, and in part because of the biennial. We cannot go on ignoring all the signs, and sooner than expected, these glorious Alps surrounding us will look very different. Why do I bring up a garden? Because somehow the history of gardens and the history of museums are resonant. The etymology of garden, jardin, garten, is enclosure. It was an enclosure for the monarch or the powerful or the landowner to hunt in peace. In Arabic and in Persian and in Turkish, the word is also related to paradise. A garden was a small paradise. It was in the translation from the Old Testament to Greek in the 3rd century that this association of an Eden that was planted by God with the idea of royalty and prestige, with the presence of animals and waters, becomes salient and becomes attached to the biblical notion of Eden, meaning this is the beginning of the perception of gardens as something that was ruined by man, where original sin happened. And this is a moment when dichotomy between humans and nature begins. So nature is something for human beings to contemplate, and that should be protected. In other cultures, specifically the Arabic, Turkish, Persian cultures, the idea of sin is totally absent from the garden. I borrow these questions and these thoughts, these ideas. I have to mention him because he's been an inspiration. Grégory Quenet, a French historian of the environment, brilliant, and of course Bruno Latour. But the question is, what would have happened? He asks, what would have happened if Adam and Eve remained in paradise, and if they did not have to leave the garden because of their sin? Then we would have something, or the beginning of something that comes back to why I brought up Issa Samp's garden in Dakar. Then we have something that is much more secular, which is the Creole garden. The Creole garden was a garden invented by runaway slaves, by disenfranchised or recently emancipated slaves. A garden that they made up for their own subsistence, but also for their own moment of breathing, of leisure, for their own moments of beauty, of enjoying beauty. And the Creole garden, there is no sin, although foundational to its constitution is the violence impacted on the human beings that they're uprooting, their kidnapping, their enslavement. And so the garden is a place where they bring with it the worlds that they were uprooted from, and where they engage with the reality that they're in with the idea of survival, with the idea of transmission, with the idea of thriving. The Creole garden is the garden of ordinary, anonymous, despised lives, but it is also a place of permanent hybridization of plants, animals, human beings, knowledges, and identities. And it brings down all the negative potentialities of the association with paradise. The Creole garden transposes one world into another, not to reproduce it, but to survive by learning through exchange and cross-fertilization. In the Creole garden, the human beings are no longer outside this space, but they are to contemplate it, but they are inside it, working side by side with non-human living forms, exchanging energy and enjoying leisure, and extracting pleasure. So this is where I want to end, with Issa Samb and reflections on what is possible and where do we start from in rethinking art spaces, exhibition practices, and the places of art in political change. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rasha, for this very, is it working? Good. For this poetic intro and for bringing the spirit of Issa to Twots. I bet he would love being here, and he will be enjoying the snow and making some artworks with it. So we are late, I know, but we'll take the time that is needed to have this short conversation whilst you're thinking about one or two questions that you would want to ask us, or Rasha particularly. I made a note whilst you were speaking that another world is possible. So if another world is possible, and that the art space is the space where such a world can emerge or arise, let us say. You've talked about all the multiple forms of gardens that exist and the way how all living forms could live together. I will ask you a very tough question.
Go ahead.
Why do you think we are at this place now? According to yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why do you think that we are stuck somehow?
I have seen, I mean, I'm not employed in a museum, but I have seen people like you, museum directors, and I'm hosted by a museum as an outside curator. I have seen how hard it is to manage those ships. It seems like water is falling from everywhere. The logics of funding are becoming more and more merchant and misguided. I also the same applies to film festivals. To convince your mayor to host a film festival, you need to show a sheet where you can project how many croissants will be sold. And what is the added value of a film festival now boils down to how much people spend when they come to your town. And with the energy crisis because of the war with Ukraine, the energy crisis in Germany, where I live, the budget cuts were insane. And at the same time, you know, that was 2022. Today, German farmers are protesting because of, you know, the subsidies removed on diesel oil, which hurts them and the environment. The situation, it seems to me that we are stuck because not because people like us lack ideas, but because, and of course, everything that Daniel said this morning, social media, political part, but I think the politicians lack ideas, lack imagination. And the way we are talking to each other is wrong. I think we do need spaces to learn to be together again, and spaces of convening. I think we need more collective lunches than we do exhibitions. We need more poetry research. Anyway, and museums, I don't know how many will survive. But they are fighting for their survival. The question is, should they survive? In an age where a lot of reactionary forces that will win elections are saying restitution of plundered colonial objects? No. Decolonize? Never. And, you know, so we are in this moment. I don't think we should get stuck in the big headlines, but I do think that society has been pulled apart. We need spaces, we need moments to be together, to talk to each other.
Well, you are talking about convening. I think E.A.T is one of these convening, and I also think that the impetus of creating this convening here in the Alps is also to bring people together to exactly imagine, project, you know, dream up, you know, all these possibilities that art can do. I mean, we are colleagues since many years, so we talk about this, and you strongly believe that art can change the world. I don't believe that art can change the world, even though I'm totally invested in art. I think that art can support a little bit the change, or, you know, guide, or be as a metaphor, or be as a cheerleader to the changing of the world. But I don't believe that, because if it was the case, we would have changed the world many times since art exists. So, but I want to come back to the idea of this possibility, the possibility of art to really transform. What do you see in that?
I don't think there's a formula to break it down, but I can cite a number of things that art can do. It can enchant, it can touch, it can move, and, you know, emotion is a displacement. Emotion is being in one state and moving to another state. Art is part of collective intelligence, and it's the sharing of collective intelligence. Art allows for complexity. I mean, I was just asked where I live. I live in Berlin. And then I was asked, but where do I spend time if it's not in Berlin? And I said, Beirut. And then I was asked, why were you born in Canada? And so, but you say you were born in Canada. I am all these things, and I am really a rabid Canadian nationalist because of the US, and if Trump comes to power, and I have to fight for Canada, I will. But my point being is, all these complexities, all these worlds that we carry with us, are worlds where there's space for them in art. There might not be space for them in other fields of social encounters.
You mentioned refuge earlier. Friends have refuge. I've been liking the word loopholes. Loopholes in German can translate into like Schlupfloch, something like that, right? Somewhere you can just retreat in order to either regenerate, in order to shield yourself from everything else, in order to conceive, to use a very feminine kind of activity. And I think that those loopholes that we need to create are necessary, but are not necessarily, you know, advancing the change and the transformation. It's not a question, actually.
No, I mean, I agree with, and I think, you know, we need different strategies. We need the different things. The other thing, I mean, so another world was possible was the sort of chant of the nascent anti-globalization movement at the beginning of the 21st century. And now the young activists use names that scare me a little bit. Extinction Rebellion, I'm all for the rebellion. Extinction, I'm afraid of. And as a word, I don't know what it carries in terms of potentialities. But I'm also old, I'm from the 20th century, so I'm not gonna question. But the other thing I wanted to say is that I heard a speech by somebody that I love, in Chiapas, and he said, we do not deserve to lose. And I think maybe that's a more gentle way of saying, a more grounded way of saying another world is possible. We don't deserve to lose.
Yeah. We cannot lose because we have to extend life, and art is an element of extending life. So are there any questions or comments in the room? There are one gentleman here, another gentleman here. Yes.
Thank you so much for the great talk and conversation. I have a question tying it back to the sort of the working title of this weekend. To me, in the reality between my two temples, powerlessness is something hard, it's solid, it's institution, it's war, it's cold, it's conflict. And in your talk, you talk about softness, collaboration, how people come together, you know, these ephemeral things that are felt in the air, gardens, plants. So my question is, I'd love to hear a bit more, is softness the answer to hardness? And if yes, in what way? How does it contribute against institutions and things?
I mean, I think we've for too long, we've been taught this adage of the survival of the fittest. It's actually the survival of the most solidaric. And I mean, you saw it probably in Elisa's presentation earlier. Community, collective making, collective sharing, collective intelligence are key. Gratitude, convening. You're looking at the granddaughter of a refugee. I've lived in so many places. I've had to leave home under duress because of civil war. And this is what I want. I don't want more war. I don't want more hate. I want gardens where I can be with people I do not know, where I can learn and give back. And whatever we do can or should or maybe hopefully will escape a system of value making that is monetary.
Just to add.
Okay, I took the drugs this morning, I guess, or something, yeah.
Well, just to add, you mentioned system of value. I didn't forget you, gentlemen, a system of value that I think also the world has to review that system of value and recognize that knowledge has been, you know, dismissed, and very important knowledge that has been dismissed needs to be reintegrated and reinstated as a system of thinking and system of feeling. And I mean, people are frowning, just I don't even want to go into a geographical thing, just female knowledge, for instance, has to be reintegrated in society fully. So, gentlemen, you have a question.
I felt very inspired. Thank you, Rasha. I felt very inspired when you said that storytellers conducting space. Can you elaborate that a bit on what does it mean for artists in the spaces of museums or what you call gardens?
I mean, yeah, I'm informed, I am educated by the artists that I work with. And actually, Elisa's presentation reminded me a lot of the work of a brilliant collective called Decolonizing Architecture. They're based in Palestine, they're temporarily in Stockholm, but basically in their last work, and they just won the Venice Biennale, they won the Lion. recently in their work, they've just been creating living rooms in museums and just trying to fit that idea of a gathering and of a convening, of a functioning living room for people in the museum. The conversations with the legal teams, with the security guards, with the financial, is just mind-boggling. And you realize how unfit, of course that's what the artists want. What does it mean that artists should be storytellers? I meant more, I mean, I really recommend you read Patrick Chamoiseau, he's just so delightful. But I really meant that artists and curators produce the narrative. I mean, I told you a story, but the idea is to produce an alternative and a different narrative and to become containers of very diverse, very plural, sometimes contradictory narratives.
Thank you. I know that we are extremely late in the program, but I'm fine as long as my hosts and directors are fine too. So there is one lady here who wants to continue on this conversation.
Yeah.
Shall we give her the word or not?
Yeah, short. Yeah, one short last question.
Well, thank you for the conversation. I'll make it very short. I'm reading indigenous theories, so I'm completely with whatever you talk about. And Linda Tuhiwai-Smith, I don't know if you heard about her. She's one of the leader of indigenous theories and questions of decolonization. And she's always saying that you can't deconstruct the house of the master with the same tools. So I think the question of experimentation is very important in art space, and I believe that artists can do that in a way. As I myself, that's why I call my work unlearning. I'm unlearning as a Swiss person to think and feel, because in Switzerland I'm in anthropology at the same time, so we call that coloniality. So it has to do with emotions, how you feel about things, how you feel about space, how you feel about time, how you feel about power, how you feel about powerless. So I think that I just wanted to add that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Thank you.